appointment to the Housing Advisory Commission, and we will start by taking an oath of office first. If you could all please stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. And when I say state your name, if you could state your name one at a time from left to right. I, and state your name.
Daniel Winkler.
Do solemnly affirm. That I will support and defend. The Constitution of the State of California. Oh, I'm sorry. The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
To the Constitution of the United States.
To the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties upon which I'm about to enter.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
And do you attest to the oath that you just took?
I do.
Thank you. You may lower your hands now. So thank you again for your volunteer effort to apply and get appointed to the commission. There's your oath of office in front of you. If you could sign and give it back to me, and I will pass around the copy afterwards.
I'll need a pen. I can borrow your pen.
All right, well, I'll call this meeting of Wednesday, February 5th to order, and I will start with roll call. Commissioner Winkler.
Here.
Commissioner Toomban.
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez. Here. Commissioner Marks. And Commissioner Cantu. Now I will read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. So since this is our redux start of the hack, I just wanted to reintroduce myself. I am Leslie Mendez, and I am the Planning and Building Manager here for the city. And I want to just thank you for applying and for your interest in this committee and commission, I should say. And I welcome, congratulations. I'm very excited for the work we're going to embark. I would also like to introduce, thank you, Chris Hess, if you can take a stand. We will be working with Chris Hess just to get a little more expertise, a little more technical expertise, and just elbow grease to assist as we move forward. So I would like Chris to take a few moments to introduce himself.
All right, thank you. I think this is live. Yeah. Greetings, good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Chris Hess. Leslie and I were colleagues when I worked in the Community Development Department as the Assistant Director at the City of San Rafael until recently. And I've been consulting for several years now with different cities and with nonprofits. I've really been working in housing since I moved to California in 2002. Working a lot with, starting with people formerly homeless permanent supportive housing, and then moving into more management kind of roles where I was able to create more permanent supportive housing with a few of the East Bay's organizations here, with Resources for Community Development and with SAHA, Satellite Affordable Housing Associates. I subsequently moved into public sector work. I was able to work on a brief basis during the initial COVID period with Alameda County, and was working in the Healthcare Services Agency to bring on the room key projects and bring people off of the streets and into hotels for protection. I went to San Rafael and led the housing and homelessness team there, which was responsible for implementing the housing element, for investigating and delivering a community engagement process and collecting community feedback on tenant protections, and a lot of the very type of questions that I think are here before the commission. So I really look forward to being a good support to you. I'm very open, and always my approach when I was a city staff and now as a consultant is really trying to bring high quality information from all of the different perspectives together to outline the decisions, the costs, and the benefits very clearly for you, and just to be very happy with whatever it is that you decide is best for the community and support you in making that decision as well as possible. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working together.
Great. So now we will move forward to item number 2, which is approval of minutes. And these are the Housing Advisory Commission meetings of October 23rd of 2024. I know that only 2 of you were at that meeting, and I also know, just want to let you know that you are able to vote for minutes even if you weren't there. If you don't feel comfortable, we will continue it, and either we can have 1 of you or 2 of you or 3 of you review the meeting. I will say, for those of you who have no experience on the commission or city government, we did go over the Brown Act as well as some general information on the housing element, as well as the establishment of the HAC, so it may be worthwhile for you to view. But with that, since I am running the meeting, I guess, tonight, do we have a motion to?
Seconded.
Good, second. Great. Roll call vote. Commissioner Cantu? Yes. Commissioner Marks? Yes. Commissioner Ramirez? Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Tiemann and Commissioner Winkler? Oh, that's fine. Great. Minutes pass. Next on the agenda is public comment, and this is for persons who desire to address the commission on a housing item that is not on the agenda. And please note that each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes, and the Brown Act limits the commission's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda.
Thank you. Francesco Papalia, longtime Albany resident. At the Solano Stroll, I was talking to a friend of mine at a booth and asked him, why do you think the cost of housing is so much around here? And he had a very simple answer. He said, greed. I asked him to explain further, but it was kind of vague. But on that note, I would like to talk to you a bit about what it's like to build affordable housing here in Albany. According to the State Treasurer's Office report, the 62-unit affordable housing project at 755 Cleveland Avenue cost $61 million to build. And I have supported this project since its inception. But using the figures from the SAHA website, I calculated an average unit size of 736 square feet for basically $1 million. That should make an eyebrow rise amongst some of you. Nearby at 555 Pierce Street, an 1,100 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo with an upgraded kitchen and bath sells for about $550,000, with all the amenities like pools and tennis courts and hot tubs, and those units all pay local taxes. So I question whether a 736 square foot rental unit should not cost $1 million to build, and if so, why? Can we afford to subsidize this kind of affordable housing using state tax dollars? The report states that a high cost is due to rising commodity costs, prevailing wage requirements, earthwork for an unlevel site, noise mitigation, and additional air filtration due to proximity to freeway and rail. Contractors mark up a percentage of the wages, which prevailing wage, I believe, at this site means union wages. Therefore, the higher the wage costs, the higher their profit, and the higher the cost to us. All the bathrooms must be larger, my understanding is, because they need to be ADA compliant. Saha, the nonprofit developer, receives a $3 million development fee for this project. So I would like for you to consider maybe that there's a better way to be doing this than $1 million per unit, and if so, is it relevant to what we're trying to achieve here through this Housing Advisory Commission? Thank you.
Hello. This is Mike Zojaji. I am have been Albany resident for 20 years. I've been watching the city council meetings for a very long time. Several years ago, the city established the Housing Advisory Commission to address housing challenges in Albany. I was there watching it live, and there was debate about the composition of it. The proposal that there would be 3 people sitting there. And during those discussions, the proposal was made that the housing provider should have a seat at the table. And Aaron Tiedemann, who was at the council at the time, acted very swiftly to dilute the representation by the housing providers and expanded it to 5 people. Just to be clear, housing providers in the city of Albany supply half of the housing in the city, yet they are granted only 1 seat at the table. I repeat, housing providers who contribute to half of Albany's housing stock have just 1 seat at the table. This was deliberately structured to be one-sided, limiting the input of housing providers while amplifying the other voices. Last fall, the voters of Albany sent a very clear message. They overwhelmingly rejected Aaron Tiedemann's re-election, signaling a strong repudiation of his extreme and unbalanced policies. Yet, through another council member, Preston Jordan, Aaron Tiedemann was put in this committee, and so to ensure that he retains influence by placing him in the advisory commission. This allows him to continue promoting the very same one-sided policies that the voters rejected, policies that lacked fairness, balance, and long-term liability. Frankly, I'm not very hopeful this commission will have those things coming in the future. Would it be fair? Would it be balanced? And would it be long-term viability? Everything we've seen so far has been short-term and one-sided, essentially allowing Aaron and other members to become popular so they can get themselves re-elected. So I'm highly questioning the real viability of this commission and the fairness and balance in this commission. We'll be watching, I'll be watching, a lot of people will be watching this commission to see if to ensure that the policies that are being proposed will be fair, effective, and sustainable. Thank you.
This is actually not David Danby. I'm just using his computer. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being on this commission. I appreciate it. I look forward to the work that you're going to do. I'm hoping that the work of this commission will help this city become not so, unbalanced, and that will help people who have lower incomes and people who are experiencing homelessness be able to find housing in Albany instead of having to have a lot of money to be able to move into the city. I also wasn't planning on commenting on this, but just from the previous speaker, I just want to say that there was a lot of negative publicity about Aaron, and I think that was put out by realtor associations, and I think that was one of the reasons why he didn't win the election, didn't get a seat on the council, and it was really unfair and based on a lot of money coming in from outside the city. So Aaron, I am glad you're on the commission, and I think that, and I look forward to seeing all the work that you all do. Thank you.
If anyone else wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda, please come up to the dais, or the podium, I should say, or raise your hand. Okay, one more.
Oh, hi, this is Elaine Stelton, and I very much would like the members of this advisory commission to introduce themselves to the community. I think it would be, City Council had an opportunity to read their applications, and I'm sure, they were posted online somewhere. I would really like to know about the credentials of and the composition of this advisory commission. I know that there are 2 tenants' rights activists on this commission, which already creates an imbalance. I personally warned City Council, to take note of the fact that there are 2 tenants' rights activists on the council, Margie Marks and Aaron Tiedemann. And, when you're receiving information as a council person, you have to consider the source. So I'd very much like to know a little bit more information about who these very kind community members are that have volunteered their time. And I appreciate your service. And I would ask those of you that do have very strong agendas to do your best to be impartial and fair, and consider the entire community, not just the one segment that you tend to represent. Thank you very much, and looking forward to learning more about you.
Hi. Hello, my name is Dawn Kawamoto, and I'm an Albany resident. And I did want to clarify something from a comment a previous woman had made. In talking to a lot of voters during the election, the tenants especially were able to draw and connect the dots between the increased costs that landlords would have with Measure R to their rents going up. And they seem to be very sensitive to the fact that even though the city council believed it would be a nominal increase, they clearly understood how that rent would probably go more than what was presented. Secondly, what I would hope the commission would consider is to try a carrot versus a stick approach to landlords and encouraging homes that are thinking of adding ADUs to try and offer financial incentives to those homeowners who may be thinking of adding an ADU, and that in return that the landlord would provide Section 8 housing. So maybe the commission should look at trying to offer an educational program to residents about what is Section 8 housing? How does it work? What are the benefits of offering Section 8 housing if you're thinking of doing an ADU? As I previously stated, my niece was a Section 8 recipient, and I, looked into what would Section 8 housing, how would that work? So I would hope you all would look at Section 8 housing and trying to find that as an incentive to encourage landlords or homeowners to become landlords, which would help with increasing the housing in Albany. Thank you.
I saw another hand previously, but it has gone down. So if you wish to speak, please use the raise the hand icon. All right, so that will close the public comment on items not on the agenda. And with that, we will move on to presentations. And the first presentation is less of a presentation than, for those of you who are new, especially, but also for you who are old hat, and maybe, let me see. Okay, well, I don't have it open. That's okay. I just wanted to point out that there is the advisory book, the advisory body handbook that is available online. I know this is one of several links that you received, so I know that can be overwhelming, and I was going to do a little bit more in-depth presentation on it, but not too big. But then I was alerted by the city clerk just this evening before that they're updating the handbook, and after they update it, she will be doing a presentation to you all at the meeting, at a future meeting. So with that, just to kind of highlight some of the points, the table of contents, and I refer to this, just to, wait, how many folks do we need for a quorum? Is serving on the city advisory board, public meetings, roles and relationships, and advisory bodies. And in it, just to speak to some of the folks who spoke tonight, the role of being on the advisory body is to listen to diverse opinions, to build teamwork, to show respect, to try to reach decision by consensus and respect nonpartisanship, as well as represent the whole city. So I trust and I know that you will carry that duty forward. So, and again, thank you, and very brief presentation, but you will be getting an updated one in the next few months. So thank you on that. The next presentation is, is the results of the 2023 City of Albany Renter Survey. All right. So tonight, I'm just presenting some key highlights of the Renter Survey, which was conducted in the fall of 2023. And for a complete summary, please do refer to attachment 1 of this item, which is available online in the packet that was presented tonight. So to commence community engagement with housing element implementation, staff initiated preliminary outreach in the form of a renter survey. This was to gauge the status and opinions about rental conditions in the community. The survey was open from July through September 10th, or the date of the Solano Stroll, and was available online in multiple languages, as well as hard copies were available in both English and Chinese at the city's library, at the community center, and at the senior center. A postcard with a survey QR code was sent to rental properties, and the survey information and link was provided in the city's e-news announcements 3 times over the course of the survey period. Of the summary presented this evening, it must be noted that the information received is not necessarily meant to be statistically significant, but instead to offer a snapshot of the renter demographics and their concerns, as well as that of housing providers. which hopefully will assist in the formulation of tenant protection policies as we move forward. So as noted, the survey was targeting renters, but was open to any respondent. Of the 325 respondents, 81% were renters and 11% were housing providers. The rest were homeowners or other folks who wished to participate. Question 4 asked about the amount of rent charged without utilities. And though ranging from under $1,500 to over $5,000, by far the majority, or approximately 70% of those who responded, pay between $1,500 and $3,000 for rent. Question 5 inquired about rent and utilities as a proportion of total income. A household that spends more than 30% of their income on housing costs is considered rent burdened. And based on the responses we received, approximately 75% of those respondents do pay 30% or more of their total income on total housing. And that would include utilities and anything else that they would need to pay. Question 6 is a demographic one. And this one asked about household composition. And I think it's interesting that 36% of the households that responded did have children, while 51% of those did not. And then there were the others of those living with roommates or extended family. Question 9 asked about tenure. And I think it speaks to the stability of our community that half of the renters have been in their home for more than 5 years, with 30% being here more than 10 years. Question 12 asked about housing issues experienced by renters in Albany. And you can see there was a variety of them, but the far majority of responses did have to do with more like the repairs, pests, safety, and other hazards, health hazards. And I'm encouraged that eviction notices of those reported come in at the bottom end. Question 14 is, are you aware of this, that the City of Albany has a rent review? And staff feels like we may not be doing the best job if only 60% or if only 34% of those who responded were aware of this program, meaning 66% did not know we have this program. Question 17 was an open-ended question asking renters to list any city services that they wished were provided. Although the most common request was for a local rent control program, answers also include code enforcement for housing habitability and repairs, provision of a clear and publicly available rental database, rental assistance or other affordable housing options, home buying assistance, and regular meetings for renters. 17 also asked about other comments that renters wish to tell us about, and they expressed their experiences in an increase in their rents, a desire to stay in the Albany community, concerns related to security deposits amounts, as well as transportation-related desires, including increased transit, parking availability, and traffic calming measures. Question 19 was an open-ended question for rental housing providers to provide feedback to the city regarding rental housing issues within the community. And the overwhelming comments related to resistance to further regulations and expressing the hardship for smaller mom-and-pop type landlords. We also received a range of negative comments about the city, though there were also positive experiences of being a housing provider in Albany, and a few comments as well regarding parking concerns. And that actually concludes just the brief overview of it. As I mentioned, the full summary of our results were in the packet, and I just wanted to share some of the highlights that I thought were most interesting. And so at this time, if you have any questions about that, I would entertain them. Yeah.
A couple of questions.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This is really great. Really like going over this.
It was not translated in, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, just a reminder to turn on your microphone and speak into it so our
Right.
minute maker can understand as well as people in the audience. At the time, it was not done in, that's a question. It was done in Chinese due to a specific request to have it done in Chinese, and the far majority of our renters are Chinese. We probably should have had it done in Spanish. However, it was available, the actual survey, when you took it, was available, if you took it online, was available in Spanish as well as several other languages.
So it was available in Spanish?
It was.
Okay.
We just didn't have a printed copy in
Oh, okay.
Spanish.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. And I was curious if the people, I know that you sent it out to all the rental units. Does that include the village, the UC Village? Just curious.
You know, that's actually a very good question that I'd have to follow up on.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, would it be possible to get some cross-analysis of the data? Because, for example, it's really alarming, as you pointed out, that 75% of people are rent burdened. And so I would love to be able to see, okay, of the people who are burdened, are they, like couples? Are they, and families with children? Sort of like that cross-analysis, kind of, also with the condition of the housing. You don't necessarily have to do, cross-analysis of everything, but some cross-tabs on the data would be, I think, really useful to just better understand, especially around the rent burden and the condition of the housing. I don't know the comparison, to other cities, but it just seems like pretty high, the fair to poor conditions of housing. So I would just love to be able to see some stats.
I can present, I can see how I can do the cross-analysis, and I agree about the rent burden. And just a reminder, though, we can provide, I'll see what kind of cross-analysis I can extract out of that. Just remember that this is all self-reported. So we will do it based on, with the background knowledge that this is what folks reported.
Thank you. Understood.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Marks.
Hi. I thought that I read, I could have gotten it wrong, that the postcard survey was sent to all rental properties.
Correct.
I thought the city didn't know which properties were rentals. So which properties did they send it to?
We have a pretty good idea of all our rental properties. We don't have individual unit numbers for all of them. So I could also, if you are interested, provide the list. I don't have that at my fingertips of who it was sent to.
Okay.
Yes. And if I can, and I apologize for not having some of the details, my former very talented colleague really ran the survey and did it, so I am picking up and do not have the background information, so thank you for all these questions. I'll be following up. Yep. Any further questions? Great, and I will open it to the public for any comments on this presentation.
Thank you. I've just got a bunch of questions. Could you tell me what percentage of the total units, first of all, how many mailings went out and what percentage responded? And do we have a number, and what is the number of the gross number of rental units that we have that we can refer to in the future? I would also like to know exactly, which should be pretty easy, and we should have one available to us, how many units are at UC Village? Both when in the old section, or the older section, and the section that just opened. And then finally, I think I'd like to know about the housing at UC is, I kind of just forgot what I wanted to ask. I know. So there was a census that was done recently. Do we have the census information? Because I thought a census actually goes door to door and asks these questions about whether it's rented or not. And that would be a pretty accurate count that was done door to door, so that we could know what percentage of the units in Albany are single-family homes and that are owner-occupied, and single-family homes that are rented, and then rental housing of multi-units, so that we can understand, like this survey, and please repeat again, how many were in this survey that responded? Because it seems to me it might be around 10% of the total of the rental units. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Campbell. I've lived in Albany for 52 plus years, so, I hate Albany. It's a terrible place to live. No, I love Albany. As far as this survey is concerned, one of my concerns always has been there was no scientific formulation for the survey. It was totally voluntary. There was no scientific way of contacting a representative sample or whatever. It just was thrown out, and those who wanted to respond could respond once, they could respond twice, they could respond 4 or 5 times. There was no control on that, no way to really know who was responding and how they fit into the demographic. So that was always been a concern of mine on this survey. And a second concern is, what is this survey going to be used for? Is it just kind of like for general information? And if that's the case, what's the value of it, since it was not done in a scientific manner? So those have been 2 concerns of mine. As far as some of the individual questions are concerned, I noticed that 50%, approximately, or more than 50% of the rents reported were in the $1,500 to $3,000 per month range. That seems, considering the cost of housing in the Bay Area and in Albany, seems to be really fairly reasonable rent range. So I wonder what the value of that information is. I noticed also that more than half of the respondents have lived in their homes for more than 5 years, and this indicates to me that, if that's accurate data, it indicates to me that there's a high satisfaction rate among those who are living and renting in Albany, which I think is good. 60% rate good to excellent condition, that's great. Although we don't know what the criteria was used for responding to that question. One tenant might say, it's great. Somebody else might say, it's horrible. Who knows? So I think there was a lack of explanation of what the criteria for what condition means, what excellent condition means, or what good means, or what bad means, and so on. And then finally, 36 of the respondents favored rent control. And I think that's hardly representative of the community as a whole. 36 out of 1,000, I don't know how many thousands of tenants there are in Albany, is certainly not very representative. So thank you very much for your work. I hope that it can be put to good use and that it can be shown to be really relevant. Thank you.
Ms. Mendez, I'm new to this, so I would like to know if I can ask a question.
Yeah, actually, yes, but let's finish public comment and then we'll come back to, yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you for the results of the survey, and I had read what was posted online too. I had a couple questions. Margie Marks already asked one of them, which is, how did you send postcards to all the renters if you don't know who all the renters are? And I don't know, I couldn't tell from your answer if it was because you were basing that on just the apartments, because the single family homes, those seem like, so did they get postcards? I'm just unclear. If there is really a list in Albany, of people that are renting both in single-family homes and apartments, that would be fantastic. I would love to see that list or know that that list existed and know that the city has that information. So I'm hoping that that's what happened, and somehow, I don't know. And Francesco Papalia's question about using the census was an interesting question, and I would love to know if that was actually going to be helpful. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting was the rent review, that basically a third of the people knew about the rent review and 2/3 didn't. And I was under the impression that it was a requirement that the housing providers tell their tenants about the rent review. So it may be not just the city not getting the word out, but it also may actually be that the city needs to prompt the landlords to do that. If that's my impression, that was written into the rent review. And just in general, I think is a really good start to get an idea, and I appreciate that you did it, and I assume there'll be more surveys and maybe more getting out to more people so we have an even clearer idea of what's going on. But the concerns, the rent burden part of it really concerns me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Dawn Calmoto, Albany resident. I just had just a couple quick questions. I know I greatly appreciate the work that went into doing the survey. I know surveys can be very hard and difficult. I was wondering what the total amount of responses that came in. Did you get like 500 responses? Did you get 1,000? And I apologize if you already stated that, and I somehow didn't hear what the total amount of responses are. But for any surveys going forward, ideally it'd be great if you can try and aim for at least 500 responses, because that makes it more statistically valid to have at least 500 responses. And then secondly, I was curious if it's possible when surveys are done to kind of compare it to what's the state statistics? When you look at Albany's survey statistics, what are the state statistics and what are the figures for the Bay Area? Just to get kind of a comparison to see where Albany kind of falls. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to speak, please use the raise the hand icon.
Hi, this is Elaine Stelton. I actually was a census worker, and I did work part-time in Albany. It wasn't the only city I worked in, and we did go door to door, and we definitely asked people, are you renters, and so forth. And either people who filled out their paperwork in advance and sent it in didn't get a knock on the door, but anybody else in Albany probably was visited at least 2 or 3 times because each household is worth about $10,000. So we made every effort, and censuses are only done every 10 years. So we definitely made every effort to contact every individual, and yes, one of the questions was, are you a tenant? So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing was, it was during COVID that we were going door to door, and we were going also in places like Albany Village that was basically deserted at the time, although I know that census workers worked with university to get the correct numbers so that we could get the amount of money that Albany deserved. I also wanted to mention that UC Village is not under any rent control because it is completely owned and managed by UC Berkeley. So even if Albany wanted to put rent control measures on people in Albany Village, that's just not within your jurisdiction. You cannot do that. With regard to surveys, I've actually studied surveys, and those folks that respond to surveys tend to have some strong emotional feelings about the subject matter, or they generally don't tend to fill out survey information. And I guess that's about it for my comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to speak, please use the raise the hand icon. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Oh, wait, one more. Oops.
Hello, hi. My name is Saya Faragtala. I have just a few questions. One, who was responsible for pulling together the survey questions? Was it an organization? Was it a firm that the Housing Commission had hired? And some of the questions left me, well, one question in particular left me chuckling, and I thought it was quite absurd, and that was, you know, if renters would like to purchase the buildings that they live in. Well, of course, I mean, like, let's not state the obvious here. And so I'm not sure where that question was leading and how that was helpful to the survey. I also wanted to know if these 130 recipients were directly from the postcards, or were they applicants from the ARPA funds? I also agree with Ms. Stelton that people who fill out these surveys and vehemently demand rent control are often quite emotional about a situation that generally doesn't stem from their apartment, and it can stem from personal life experiences. As a property manager, you might understand my statement, but I also wanted to know, in particular, when you have such a good survey and it shows such positive results from residents in terms of satisfaction, as Peter Campbell had pointed out, I'm not sure what there is to fix. I do agree. I was a little bit surprised at seeing the habitability portion being a little bit larger than I thought. But I overall, I felt like Albany was the survey, or the graphs and the results seemed very positive. So again, I'm not sure if there's an overall agenda that's been predetermined that's being pushed through, and the survey is just sort of as a formality. And if those postcards did go out, and where did they go out to? And for 130 people, for decisions on such heavy policies that you plan on discussing this evening as the phase one, I'm just wondering, how is it that if half the city, approximately 16,000, this is the number that's been thrown out there, at an estimated 16,000 renters, how is it 130 is an appropriate pool to draw from to make any real and valid policy making? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak? Okay, one more.
Hello, this is Mike Zojaji. I'm Albany resident. I've been Albany resident for 20 years. I'm a scientist. I have very strong scientific background with numbers and statistics. Clearly, if you look at the numbers of the survey that I've received, what we would call statistically insignificant, meaning the data, the accuracy of the data can be highly questioned. So that's just to start off with. And my concern here is that the committee members will take this as a source of truth and we run with it. and will try to make decisions that will be ineffective. That's part one. Part two is with regards to the survey itself. It appeared that some of the questions were directed to, questions were made to direct people into or commission to a certain policy outcomes. For example, one of the last questions was about, do you want to purchase the unit where you're living? If you think of the housing document that the City of Albany has, there was a proposal that they would put TOPA on it. TOPA is essentially giving tenants right to first buy, no one else does. And then if they can't buy it, then other people from public can buy it. It appears that the question was deliberately embedded in there to support what will be coming through this committee this year or the coming years to push for TOPA. So I highly question the legitimacy of some of these questions, of the questions that were added. It seems that they were preamble to making specific conclusions that would enhance specific predetermined policies that are in people's mind. So I highly encourage those who are impartial that question the validity of the survey, question the accuracy of the survey, and not put too much stock in it. And if you want to propose policies, ensure that you have proper data, as well as you ensure that whatever decisions you make is fair and balanced. As I mentioned earlier, the entire committee is unbalanced, is not fair, is designed that way, and I'm hoping that committee members will act in a fair and very balanced manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Please use the raise the hand icon. And that closes the public hearing. And I'll answer a few of those questions and we'll turn it back to the commission if there's any more questions. So I may have missed some. But in general, as mentioned, this was a snapshot of people wishing to respond. It was a community engagement tool and not meant to be statistically significant. So we can provide additional cross-analysis on survey respondents, but again, it was 238 total respondents. And so that would be based on self-reporting kind of statistical analysis of who responded. So again, it's meant to be a snapshot, but I do hear that the commission and members of the public would like to hear more demographic information that would be provided by more intense groups such as the U.S. Census data that will be provided as we move forward. One other thing, well, maybe two other things. We don't have a list of all renters. We do not have a full rent registry, but we do have knowledge of multifamily apartments and what those were the units that we did send out. Again, I'm not sure if we did send it to UC Village or not, but as one of the commenters speak, city policies don't apply to UC Village. So it's still interesting to know if we did send it to them, so I will follow up on that. And then just one final thing. The survey is not determining policies. Again, so it was an engagement technique. And this Housing Advisory Commission is the forum where we do hope to engage more people. So I'm encouraged by the folks who are in attendance tonight, and we hope that more folks come forward as we move forward. Okay, and with that, any further questions? Commissioner Winkler, yes, please.
So just a couple of things first. I just quickly Googled how many rental units we might have in Albany. And according to the Bay Area Census, it's between 3,461 units and 3,589 units, which seems to be a tight enough group of people that you could literally hit every mailbox. In the interest of fairness, we have a renter survey. We should also have a housing provider survey that's asking them questions about what their challenges are operating a property in Albany. You know, insurance is a crisis right now. Insurance has gone up 400% for many property owners here, and you're asking them to absorb all of that when you do things like rent control. Same thing with voter-approved bonded indebtedness on the tax bill. So I think if you're going to do a renter survey, to be fair, you should do a housing provider survey. to give people equal voice when they're, when you're considering changing policy or creating policy. That's my comment.
Great.
Just have a couple of, one follow-up question or comment based on the, what Commissioner, sorry, your last name? Winkler said and a couple of other people. So you mentioned that this was intended to be a community engagement effort. So I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through more of what that really means. I mean, to collect this, because community engagement to me sounds like something other than a survey. You engage with the community, provide them information, but this was collecting information. And so I'm wondering what the intent was behind collecting this data, if there was something that really kind of brought it up, that would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you for the question. So this also, you can see, was done a year and a half ago. It was done off of the tail of kind of the whole housing element workshops and engagement that had occurred then. And a lot of the questions were follow-up of information and comments that we heard in the workshop and need for that. So part of the reason it's a little delayed in repeating it, so, you know, it is possible that even many of those surveyors no longer live in the city. So as when I said it's a snapshot in time, I do mean that. So engagement to us is not just going out to the community, but try to engage information for them. So even though the survey was anonymous, it is, hopefully people didn't just, you know, stuff the ballot box here with survey answers, but sometimes people would prefer not to attend in a public meeting, even if it is virtually, and express opinions anonymously. So our goal as city staff is to try to engage in all means and forms to try to gather as much information. So keeping that in mind, hopefully we can keep the survey. I know there was interest since it was done so long ago. You know, why haven't you given us the results? So I wanted to make sure that those results were out there, and there they are.
Thank you. Thank you, staff, for the work and the presentation. A couple of brief comments. First, that just to note, as has been mentioned, yes, the survey is not really our only source of data. And as Leslie mentioned, census and ACS data is really the backbone and what you'll see if we look at the housing element. And is what's really useful for analyzing these sort of trends on a citywide and granular basis. I would note that I think the most important thing in the survey that we've mentioned is borne out by that ACS data and the census data is that, you know, most renters in Albany are paying more than they can afford. That cost burden number is important. Finally, just a small data note about, you know, this survey is not perfect as a means of data collection, but it is useful. That, you know, a survey like this is necessarily going to underrepresent evictions. I know that was the least in there in those 10 issues, but given that people who are evicted will probably be outside of Albany, they are not going to show up on this sort of survey. So it's important to get other data sources for that as well. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions by the commission? I'm just going to follow up on one thing that Commissioner Tiemann said, which is our housing element does have a large section on demographics in terms of composition of our population and you know, household composition. So anyone who is interested, I do want to encourage you to look at that chapter of the housing element as well. So thank you to everyone. And now we're moving on to our actual discussion item, which is Tenant Protection Programs and Phase 1 Housing Element Implementation.
Leslie, before we start that one,
yes.
If I could ask my fellow committee members, we've been going for an hour. We hopefully won't go for another hour, but I wanted to put it out there if we wanted to take a brief recess if anyone needed a break.
Does anyone need a break? No? Do you?
Cool.
Your team? Okay.
Just wanted to offer it.
Thank you. Okay. So good evening. Tonight's presentation is to review the tenant protection programs identified in the first phase of housing implementation and for commissioners to provide feedback on staff recommended order of forthcoming review by the HAC. Just a little background. On September 8th, 2023, the California Housing and Community Development Department, or HCD, provided official certification of the City of Albany's housing element, which is our long-range planning effort several years in the making. The housing element outlines an assessment of the city's housing needs, opportunity sites, constraints to housing production, and a robust matrix of housing goals, policies, and programs, all with the goal of facilitating the development of the jurisdiction's required regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, unit total. The policies and programs are broken into 6 distinct goals that range from housing production to equitable housing access to fair housing and housing security. On October 2nd of 2023, the City Council approved a phase implementation plan, which included the following tenant protection measures: evaluation of the rent review program, non-discrimination anti-harassment, just cause for eviction, rent stabilization, and access to legal counsel. So just some state legislative framework that will help inform some of our policies as we move forward, and this is by no means exhaustive, but one is the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, and that exempts single-family homes and condominiums and post-1995 construction from rent control. It also allows landlords to establish initial rental rates for a new tenant, which is called vacancy decontrol. Next is the California Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which is also AB 1482. And this is a statewide law that limits rent increases and protects tenants from evictions without cause. It went into effect on January 1st of 2020 and is currently set to expire on January 1st of 2030. Certain housing types, including single-family homes, privately owned condominiums, duplexes in which the owner resides in one of the units, designated affordable units and apartment buildings built in the last 15 years, similar to Costa-Hawkins, are exempt from the AB 42 requirements. California law also provides protection from harassment and discrimination because of protected characteristics such as age, 40 and over, ancestry, color, creed, denial of family and medical care leave, disability, both mental and physical, including HIV and AIDS, marital status, medical conditions, including cancer and genetic characteristics, national origin, race, religion, sex, and sexual orientation. California laws also limit when and how and to what extent housing providers can consider someone's criminal history in rentals, requires reasonable accommodation for disabilities, and prohibits retaliation against someone for exercising their rights. And there are certain exemptions for owner-occupied single-family homes, housing operated by organizations and private clubs that limit occupancy to members, and statements indicating a preference for same-sex roommates in a shared living situation. So the first item, which I'm listing is non-discrimination and anti-harassment. This task for the HAC will be to review the provisions of the California non-discrimination and anti-harassment laws and evaluate whether the city should consider any additions that warrant adoption of a local ordinance, as well as evaluate the costs and benefits of establishing and operating a process for administrative citation and penalties, including staffing for inspection and enforcement. As extensive, unsunsetted non-discrimination and anti-harassment policies are codified in state law, staff recommends that this program be evaluated first. Additionally, as anti-harassment and non-discrimination regulations are typically adopted in a single ordinance with just cause for eviction, which we'll discuss next, staff recommends that these two sub-programs be considered sequentially for evaluation. And just to make clear, again, California has some of the most stringent non-discrimination and anti-harassment laws, more stringent than that of the federal, so it would be more evaluating what we could do in terms of a program of enforcement.
Question?
Let's just, yeah, thank you. So next is just cause for eviction, which is a policy establishing specific scenarios which a property owner is permitted to issue an eviction notice. As mentioned, the Tenant Protection Act, or AB 1482, established statewide eviction protections for most residential tenants after they have lived in their unit for 12 months. The law sets out two kinds of permissible evictions: at-fault evictions, where the landlord moves to evict a tenant because the tenant is allegedly at fault, and no-fault evictions, where the landlord moves to evict the tenant through no fault of the tenant. At-fault causes includes non-payment of rent, breach of a material term of the lease, nuisance, waste, or using the unit for unlawful purposes, criminal activity, etc. No-fault causes may include the owner move-in, intent to demolish or substantially remodel the unit, or withdrawal from the unit from the rental market. Oops, sorry. The task for HAC is to review the provisions of AB 1482 and evaluate whether the city should consider any additions or amendments that would warrant adoption of a local ordinance. Such amendments could be considered could include extending or eliminating the sunset clause, expanding or contracting the types of residential units to which the protections apply, as well as evaluating the costs and benefits of establishing and operating processes for administrative citations and penalties, including staffing for inspections and enforcement. And as I said, as mentioned, just cause for eviction is typically coupled in a single ordinance with anti-harassment and non-discrimination. So staff, again, recommends that these two sub-programs be reviewed sequentially by the HAC, with just cause occurring after the anti-harassment and non-discrimination. The third subprogram is the rent stabilization. And rent stabilization is a policy that limits how much a housing provider can increase rent each year. It is designed to protect tenants from excessive rent hikes, thereby retaining a level of affordability and reducing the risk of displacement of vulnerable households. AB 1482 did establish limits on annual rent increases on applicable units in all California jurisdictions to no more than a gross total of 10% per year. The task of HASC will be to review the provisions of the Tenant Protection Act and evaluate whether the city should consider entering additions or amendments that would warrant adoption of a local ordinance. And such amendments to be considered can include, again, extending or eliminating the sunset clause, setting a lower percentage rent cap, identifying exceptions in cases of capital improvement projects and fair right of return, as well as evaluating the costs and benefits of establishing and operating the new city program for rent stabilization, including challenges of funding and administration. Now, you might notice that these are the same, and I'm going to reiterate the last part about resources even before we get to the one. That's going to be a common theme, just with the challenges, the constraints in terms of funding and staffing. So when we do move forward, we will be doing that evaluation. And finally, the city's, actually it's not finally, the city's rent review program, as mentioned, is a program that we adopted in June of 2018. And the program does not limit rent increases, but does establish a two-step process for tenants to appeal rent increases that exceed 5% over a one-year period. The program covers most residential units in the city, and housing provider participation in the rent review process is mandatory, but all recommendations are non-binding. The city has contracted with Echo Housing to administer the program. And as one of the public commenters did mention, a part of the program does require that, well, not this part, but commencing in November of 2018, housing providers are required to register all rental units with the city and inform tenants of the availability of this program in English, Spanish, and Chinese. So the task for you all on this one is staff actually will complete an evaluation of the existing program, including data on the number of cases and their outcomes. And the findings of the evaluation will be presented to you to develop recommendations for addressing any identified deficiencies or replacing the program with new recommended tenant protection measures that you have previously reviewed. Evaluation should again include the costs and benefits of establishing and operating any upgraded program for rent review, including challenges of funding and administration. And HAC should also discuss means to increase awareness of the rent review program among housing providers and tenants. As the commenter mentioned, the onus does say on the rental house providers, the housing providers, but I do think the onus is also on staff and the city to make sure that everyone knows about this program. So staff recommends review of the existing rent program should follow the evaluation of the other programs previously mentioned as the anti-harassment, non-discrimination, as well as just cause, because those recommendations of those previous programs may inform recommendation of a revised rent review program. Really, now this one's finally. The final one is the access to legal counsel. This is neither further defined or described in the housing element. Therefore, the task of the HAC will be to discuss what access to legal counsel might encompass. Options could include connecting tenants and housing providers with county or regional nonprofit organization that provide such services. It would be imperative that, again, any consideration of direct legal assistance by or paid for by the city be accompanied by an appropriation of funding as required. And again, we will be looking at the funding challenges as we move forward with this program and the program recommendations. Staff does recommend that this program component be considered once the other program components of the Tenant Protection Program have been evaluated and established, and more data has been collected to understand the demonstrated need for such services as well as other program improvements. So staff does recommend that the HAC provide feedback on the recommended order of Phase 1 tenant protection programs for forthcoming review. After discussion and deliberation, we will begin working on first-year program elements for presentation and deliberation by you all at what is estimated to be your next scheduled meeting, which is first Wednesday in March. That includes my presentation, and before we turn it over to public comment, I would like to hear any questions you may have.
I have a question. So the presentation, will that include, for example, for the just cause eviction? I understand there is the, California-wide statute. I think it's AB 1842 or something like that. Would that include kind of what gaps from there the city is trying to address? Is that kind of the idea?
That is up for you all to determine what it will include. When we come forward with that program, we will provide a lot more detailed background information as well as any potential information we can provide on current conditions in the city to you all to try to give you as much as informed discussion and deliberation. So it is up to you to decide whether there are gaps you want to fill and or you're good with the status quo.
I have a question. You mentioned that 1482 has a non-harassment and non-discrimination clause in it. There's no enforcement in the just cause for eviction. There's no enforcement mechanism in 1482. So if a tenant wants to appeal that, they have to personally go to state court, get an attorney. Is there an enforcement mechanism in 1482 if there's discrimination or harassment?
So 1482 doesn't address discrimination and harassment. Those are other California laws. And the answer is there may be civil matters, but not a local program for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Also to clarify, 567, the follow-up to 1482, add an enforcement authority for local authorities, so it doesn't, the tenant doesn't have to go to state court with it. It can be enforced by local city and county attorneys.
Thank you. Yes, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank.
We actually, do you have any questions? We'll first do questions, and then we will turn it to public comment, and then we'll come to comments and deliberations. But apologies. So if there are no more, are there any more questions? No? Okay, so I will turn it and open the public comment period.
Thank you. Actually, I think that was a great presentation. I loved seeing everything put together like that. So what I did notice in particular is that there seems to be quite a lot of regulations in place that covers all the different issues. And from the survey that you discussed and what Commissioner Marks said, there seems to be a gap between what is available to be enforced and to help both the tenants and the property providers and their knowledge of it. So much could be accomplished if we were really rigorously told, informed property providers what their rights and responsibilities are, like about the rent review, and gave tenants better education about their rights and responsibilities that are right there on the books, California law. It's really great to see that all. I mean, the presentation that you gave maybe could be sent out to everybody, in town. How can we disseminate and get everybody to listen to this and understand that there are these state laws, and maybe what a good job of this commission would be to make sure that everyone in the city can avail themselves of the rights and responsibilities already protected and given to the public. So thanks, and hope you are successful at that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you again. And thank you to each and every one of you for taking on this truly Herculean task of trying to shape the housing policies and landscape in Albany. You've got your work cut out for you. It's not going to be an easy job. And you're to be commended for taking on this huge task. So I commend you all. Now, I urge both you, the Commission, and the City Council to consider the impact of any of your actions on the needs of the tenants and on the needs of rental providers. And by the way, what I'm going to be saying here is kind of like a sermon, I guess, and I hope you don't take it as negatively or whatever. I'm just trying to get my thoughts about what you're looking at, what you're up against out in the open. But your actions are going to have a lot of impact on the needs of tenants and on the needs of rental providers and the willingness of rental providers to continue to provide rentals for those who either do not want to own their own home or who are unable to do so. Your most important mission, in my view, is to encourage rental providers, both present and potential future ones, to continue to provide housing for those who do not own their own homes, as well as make sure that programs to help tenants and providers are enacted as needed and were essential to the well-being of the community. Tenants have rights, and the federal government and state of California government has done a good job of identifying those rights. If you are going to try to legislate additional rights, be sure you don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Rental providers have rights too. Remember, if it were not for rental providers, there would not be any rental property available to those who want to rent them. I encourage you to reach out to the rental provider community and work together with them and us, to develop programs that benefit both groups. Any programs enacted need to be funded in a way that is equitable and helpful to tenants, rental providers, and the community at large. Housing issues are community issues and must be implemented in a way that is fair to all and benefits all. I implore this committee, rental providers, tenants, and the city as a whole to work together to implement programs and policies as needed that are fair to all, that are supported and financed by all Albany residents, and that are beneficial to all residents and taxpayers. Rental providers are already severely stressed by many regulations and requirements that they must adhere to. Many providers are facing tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars of city and state mandated expenses. These expenses can only be paid by the revenue generated by the rentals on the property. There is no other source of funds. Please, please keep this in mind when considering new programs and their funding. I've heard from many providers that they are considering leaving Albany and investing elsewhere. If this happens, those renters will face extreme upward pressure on rents when considering that most rental properties have been owned for many years.
If you can please wrap
are
up.
advantaged by Prop 13, and taxes will increase when they're sold. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. It was a great summary of the existing rules and regulations. I'm wondering if in the future meetings, all information, including presentations in its entirety, will be presented on the website where people and all the community can go and have a look at them. I did not personally see this presentation there. My apologies if it's there, and I think it wasn't there, and I apologize if I'm mistaken, but I was unable to find this presentation there. So, and if it wasn't there, my ask is to ensure that all information, all presentations, all materials that will be provided, discussed at each meeting, be provided in its entirety prior to the every meeting on the website. Again, thank you very much, and I look forward to a very positive and very balanced commission.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I agree, appreciated it. I just wanted to speak to the legal counsel. I know that was the last item and that there wasn't a lot of information, and it sounded like that was going to be considered last, but I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of research, a lot of studies that show how important legal counsel is, especially if the question of eviction has come up. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition has a great article about it. And in that they say, without a right to counsel, representation in eviction cases is greatly imbalanced. On average, only 3% of tenants are represented nationwide compared to 81% of landlords. And it shows that, and it goes on to say, decades of research shows that tenants facing eviction who have lawyers are far more likely to remain in their homes, but even if that's not possible, they're more often avoid evictions on their records, get more time to move, receive reduced or eliminated rent judgments, and avoid forced displacement than tenants without lawyers. The research also shows that costs associated with evictions, such as the creation and upkeep of homeless shelters and the provision of emergency medical care, are more expensive for cities and states than the cost of representation. And so that's one of the big, of course, this is an organization that is working with people experiencing homelessness, but I hope that receives attention, and that maybe you look at some studies and try to figure out ways where that money could come from to provide tenants with legal counsel that they may not be able to afford otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. With regard to the rent review program, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, if a housing provider does not notify a tenant of the rent review program, and then subsequently raises the rent, my understanding is that the landlord then forfeits the rental increase for an entire year. Now, I could be wrong on that. I'm not one to raise rents, but please do let me know if that's incorrect information. Also, I've reached out over the years to Echo Housing to try and get a pulse on exactly how many mediations and so forth they've done. It's actually quite few every year, very, very few. And when I've tried to understand what is generating those few mediations, it seems to be either a landlord that's not aware that they're not allowed to raise the rent to that level, or a tenant that wasn't aware that the rental increase was in fact allowable, that the landlord was in fact raising the rent to an appropriate level given the current legislation. So it seemed that there was just a misunderstandings for the most part between what was allowed and what was not allowed that was generating the mediations that Echo Housing was doing. Anyway, that was my take on things. I will very much look forward to Leslie Menendez's presentation on that. I would really love to know how that program is operating. With regards to evictions, as we know, there was an extraordinarily long period of time that property providers could not evict tenants at all during the eviction moratorium. And it's also very challenging to get accurate information on evictions because Albany is grouped together with all of Alameda County, and unfortunately nobody separates out that data on what exactly the numbers are in Albany. But I think for the most part, all of us would agree that there are very, very few evictions in Albany. Take good care. Have a good evening.
Thank you. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak, who has not yet spoken, please raise the hand, use the raise the hand icon. And I do not see anything, so that closes the public hearing. And just if I can comment on a few things that was brought up, I will consult with our city clerk, and if there's no issue with posting presentations, I will definitely post all staff presentations, most likely after the hearing, as I'm usually working on them very last-minutely. But I think that is a great idea. I just don't want to promise that if it goes against city policy in any way, shape, or form. And then in terms of the rent review, I'm not going to answer those questions. Right now, there is information on our rent review program online, and the reason I'm not answering it right now, I don't have the answer off the top of my head. And we will, when we do discuss the rent review, go into it in a lot more detail, but that can be found online. So thank you all for your participation in the public comment on that, and now we will turn it over to the commission for discussion, deliberation, comments, and anything else. And I think Commissioner Cantu.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Winkler for pointing out something that I really believe needs to be looked at. We need to take always in mind that the owners have to be heard. Right now, there has been public comment that has questioned our credibility, that some of us here are coming forward with an agenda, and we do have a lot of work to do. And I spent a good deal looking at everything that was sent to us. And one of the things that I saw, there was a thread that at the end of every section was, well, it all depends on how many staff we have and funding. So it really kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth because I'm not here for political theater. I'm hoping that we can all come together and come forward with some common sense ideas and some policies also, because there are holes in the state laws. And we need to not only protect tenants, which I am, but also we need to make it not so burdensome for the homeowners also. So I look forward to working and listening to what people have to say and coming forward with as much as we can to help and lift the whole of the community. Thank you.
Commissioner Tiedemann?
Thank you, Leslie, for the presentation. Having put together some similar ones, I understand the effort that goes into all the research and background info in there. I just wanted to say that I think this phased approach makes a lot of sense and falls with what the City Council directed be done, as well as what's in the housing element that has to be considered by our what we've committed to under the housing element process. And I appreciate the attention to what is possible in the implementation. I think it's going to be incumbent on all of us to remember that all these programs have to be implemented, which is really where the rubber meets the road. And it's really nice to write a good policy, but you have to make sure it works with the staff time and resources you have. And that is something that, as lovely as some of our state law is, it often doesn't think about as much. So it's our chance to really make sure that we can do it and right size it to the resources we have in Albany. And I know that our city staff will make do with shoestrings and make it turn into something great. So thank you.
Anyone else?
I have no comments.
No? Commissioner Ramirez? No? Commissioner Marks? All right, great. Then if it's all good by you, we will move forward with the implementation, maybe one or two items at a time. I was just discussing with Chris earlier, either depending on how it goes, it may go to council kind of incrementally too, because I think all of that all at once is maybe a little bit overwhelming and no one wants to stay till 2 in the morning. So anyway, so thank you all for listening and for commenting. And now we'll turn to item 5.2, which is election of the Housing Advisory Commission Chair and Vice Chair. The chair is responsible for overseeing the public debate in a manner that encourages input while also facilitating the decision-making process. I'm just going to read, again, this is directly quoted from our advisory handbook. As I said, I've been referring to it a lot, but responsible of the chair include reviewing agendas prior to meetings, starting the meeting on time, managing time limits for agenda items, deciding questions of agenda order, and ensuring public understands the nature of the issues being discussed, keeping discussions focused and fair, soliciting opinions from all members, ensuring the range of alternatives have been addressed during discussion, ensuring the full range have been discussed, providing structure for addressing complicated issues, attempting to reach decisions efficiently, and announcing decisions. And then in the events of a temporary absence by the chair, the vice chair shall preside. And I think you're all familiar with commission meetings, but essentially most of what I was doing tonight would be done by the chair as we move forward and once the chair is elected. And with that, staff does recommend, if you want to talk a little and make any recommendations or nominations or self-nominations for a chair, to do so. It would be wonderful. Alternatively, if you all as a body wish to consider it a little further, I would put it on as the first item for the next meeting agenda.
I would ask, does anyone want to be the chair?
I'd be happy to serve as the chair. I've chaired a number of meetings in this style, and I try and get us all here efficiently. That is my number one goal in my previous meetings.
Yeah, I nominate Aaron as the chair.
I second.
Any public discussion on this?
Is there public discussion on this? We can hear public, and I don't actually know, but yes, we can open the public discussion because I'd rather err on that side. But no nominations, yes.
Leslie, before we do that, can we get a nomination for vice chair?
Yes,
See
why
if
don't we
anyone
do
wants
that,
to
yes.
serve?
So first of all, are there any other nominations for chair? Any bundling nominations?
Rosanna, would you want to do it, or Noel?
Sure, I'll volunteer to be vice chair.
Okay, so we need a nomination in a second.
I would move that Rosanna be nominated as vice chair.
Okay. Okay, so before we take a vote on that, yes, I will open the public hearing.
Hi. And listening to the comments so far, both here on the dais and in the public comment, I think that this commission would be best served if whoever serves as chair doesn't have any preconceived goals in this case. And it seems what I've heard so far that Commissioner Ramirez and Commissioner Cantu have both expressed a positive concept of listening to all sides and wanting to have all sides heard. And I think those two would could chair and vice chair this commission in the best way possible. It's not that hard to run the meeting. The main purpose of chair is to bring a clear, inviting discussion amongst all the participants. And anyway, with that in mind, I suggest that Ramirez and Cantu be chair and vice chair. Thank you.
I would hope that you would consider to have Rosanna as the chair and Noel as the vice chair as well. I think that would also help Albany residents have a bit of an easier acceptance of the commission's proposals as well going forward, in part because of how things kind of ended up with the election and the things that I heard in the months before election in talking to many residents. So that's just my 2 cents.
Hey, good evening again. There clearly are some sentiments on the side of the property owners that there is already an imbalance due to 2 tenant activists currently sitting on this housing commission. Aaron certainly had plenty of time when he was on the dais, to impact the housing element, and he did. So he's had a voice, he's been heard, and now I really think we need some other folks to step in and step up. And I know you're all volunteers, so I'm so grateful to you for stepping into those shoes. And I would ask Aaron to gracefully, allow some other people to serve the community since he has already had an impact. Thank you so very much. Good evening.
Silence is kind of deafening. Great. Oh, is there somebody else?
Sorry. Elaine, did you just speak? Was that Elaine? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the silence is kind of deafening from the dais, but just as a parliamentary matter, there may be thoughts about if we want to make do a different thing than has been motioned and seconded, can that be done? And I'd just like to remind people that parliamentarily speaking, it's possible to make a substitute motion for consideration. So just wanted to make that point.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak again. I've already voiced my deep concern about Aaron Tiedemann's influence in the last several years and his unsurprising desire to be the chair of this committee. I still have strong concern about the committee being very unbalanced to start with, and having Aaron Tiedemann as the chair would just confirm my concerns. I recommend that the substitute recommendation be made for others to be chair, and hopefully we will have a little bit more fair and balanced approach as we are starting this for the year. Thank you very much for your time.
I guess I'm startled, or maybe not startled, but concerned about the kind of rumor mongering that's been going on in Albany concerning Aaron and Preston Jordan to some extent. And I'm sorry to see it continue. I believe that the person who's running the meeting doesn't have control over what happens, over what people say. It's just a matter of running the meeting. And I support Aaron. And I'm sorry, I apologize that I don't know the name of the person who was nominated as vice chair, but I don't have any reason to think that either one of them would not do a good job in running a meeting, which is what this is about. It's not like they're going to make all the decisions. This is a commission, not a dictatorship or whatever is this being applied. Thank you.
And that closes the public hearing. And I'm going to just follow up on that it is City Council who will be making decisions. This is an advisory body. And with that, we have a motion and a second for chair for Aaron Tiedemann. I'll take a vote. Commissioner Cantu. Commissioner Marks. Yes. Commissioner Ramirez. Yes. Commissioner Tiedemann.
Yes.
Commissioner Winkler.
I'm going to abstain. Thank you.
Okay. Congratulations, Chair Tiedemann.
Yep.
And for Vice Chair, Commissioner Ramirez, Commissioner Cantu, Commissioner Marks, Commissioner Ramirez, Commissioner Tiedemann,
Yes.
Commissioner Winkler.
And I'm going to abstain again.
Okay, congratulations. We have a Vice Chair, Commissioner Ramirez. And again, I do also want to thank you for your service because I know it's a little more being serving in that role. So thank you. And now we will move to announcements, staff and commission member announcements. I think I did most of my announcements through the presentation, so I do not have anything else. But if there's any member, yes, Commissioner Tiedemann.
It was suggested in Good of the City earlier that it would be beneficial for the public if we would be able to introduce ourselves.
Oh, yes.
Now might be a good
Wonderful.
time for that.
Thank you. Why don't we go down the row if that serves, and you'll take over as chair next meeting if that's okay. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Cantu, if you want to take a minute or two to introduce yourself and.
Thank you. My name is Noel Cantu. I am a 20-year resident of Albany. I truly enjoy this city. I have 4 children. I brought them up. They went through the Albany schools. I moved here 20 years ago, like I said, from Richmond, so there was a big difference. But I'm really looking forward to working and getting to know people here. there's already dissension, and I'm hoping that we can kind of come together and work together for the betterment of our city, Thank you.
Hi, I'm Margie Marks. I have been in Albany for over 40 years. I love Albany. I am very active in a group called Albany Thrives Together. We run a weekly shower program at the high school for people that don't have access to showers, and we run a weekly laundry program for people. We help them do their laundry. We also advocate for affordable housing, and I am a tenant advocate, but I want what's best for my city. I don't want this to be a huge, but I know that there will be. I mean, I just sense that there will be. I can feel it already tonight. And I don't like the demonization of Aaron. That really upsets me. You know, if you want to go after, if you can go after me, I don't care, but I guess because Aaron was a public official, it took certain measures. You know, he's a target, but that really bothers me, and so I hope that that doesn't continue. Thank you.
So I've been living in Albany for 18 years now. I have 2 kids in the Albany schools. And I guess my interest in joining this commission is that I've done some work, a lot of it just, analysis of housing, a variety of housing issues, both in the U.S. as well as internationally. And formerly, I did some evaluation work of some housing programs, including the Partnership for the Bay's Future that's funded by San Francisco Foundation. And so from that process, I learned a lot about some of the housing issues in the Bay Area, and I just learned to appreciate that it's a lot of hard work. So just really delighted to be here.
I'm Aaron. I am a lifelong Albany resident, and I'm here to give back to my community. I previously served on the city council and served as mayor, and in my day job, I'm on Leslie's side of the dais, and I work for Alameda County doing affordable housing funding and housing policy. So I am very interested in the topics of this committee, as it is my wheelhouse. Thank you.
My name is Dan Winkler. I have worked in Albany since 1996. I did the condominium conversion on Pierce Street called Bayside Commons, and I've dealt with housing for my 36-year real estate career. So I hope to contribute my perspective on what I see going on with housing, what the demands are, and what the solutions can be that are fair to everyone at the table and everyone in the room, because without one, you don't have the other. So I look forward to doing this, to working with you, to giving you my honest opinion, and to seeing if we can come to a consensus. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all, and thank you for bringing that up. Any other announcements by commissioners? No? Well, with that, our next meeting is scheduled for March 5th, 2025, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.